What's up, fight fans? Gage here, Global Combat News. Just going to give you a little betting breakdown on this weekend's pay-per-view, UFC 323. I'm just going to break down the entire main card for you, and then I'm going to put a little parlay at the end that you might want to place some money on, so just stay tuned for that. First fight this weekend goes down in the UFC light heavyweight division between former champion Jan Blachowicz and Bogdan Gaskov. Gaskov is currently riding a 4-fight winning streak since he lost his UFC debut to Volkan Oezdemir. He's pretty solid everywhere the fight goes. You know, he's got decent grappling. He's a good striker. He likes to pressure a lot, and he's got pretty good power for the division. This is definitely a step up, though, in competition for him, as he'll be fighting a former champion, Jan Blachowicz, who's literally only lost recently, at least, to the tippy top of the division. Jan's currently riding a 2-fight losing streak, a close split decision to Alex Pereira, and we all know how good Alex Pereira is, and also another decision loss to Carlos Oberg, who will probably be fighting for the title very soon. If Jan wasn't 42 years old and I think getting towards the end of a very good career, I would definitely lean him in this fight. The line is something like a toss-up. I believe at the moment Jan is a slight favorite, -130 or something like that. At the moment, I do have Bogdan by decision. I think he'll put a little bit too much pressure, a little bit too much pace on Jan, but if Jan was just a little bit younger, I definitely would lean Blachowicz, but it does, when guys start getting 41, 42, 43, it just, you start to know that the decline is inevitable. And even though he hasn't looked awful in his last 2 losses, he even looked pretty good against Pereira. I just think that it's hard to pick a fighter at that age who's on a losing streak and is going up against a younger, hungrier fighter who's currently riding a 4-fight winning streak. So start off the UFC main card this weekend. I'm going to go ahead and take Bogdan Gaskov by decision. Next up on the main card, we have a very intriguing bantamweight matchup going down between former double champion Henry Cejudo and Peyton Talbot. This is one of those fights. The line, I think, is a little too much for how I think that this fight could go. Peyton's closing at something like a -275 favorite, and while I understand he's a very hyped prospect, and he did look up to fill some of those holes in his game in his last win, just a couple fights ago he got exposed a little bit. Grappling wise, Hani Barcelos was able to take him down at will, control him, and Hani Barcelos is not as good a wrestler as Henry Cejudo is. That said, Cejudo is currently riding a 3-fight losing streak, even though that last loss, it was a technical decision after he couldn't continue due to an accidental eye poke, so they went to the scorecards, and he's really only lost the top of the division. He did look like he had a bad weight cut, I will say, and he has gone into this fight talking about this being his last fight and that he's going to retire after this one. So usually if a fighter goes into a fight and is talking about retirement, it usually doesn't go well for him. But I think stylistically, Talbot did show a lot of grappling improvements in his last fight against Felipe de Lima, who is a very good grappler. I still think that Henry Cejudo's wrestling could pose a lot of problems for the young prospect Peyton Talbot. And at the line, Henry plus 220, I think that's very smart money to place on him. If I were to guess, if Henry wins, he would control him, use a lot of his that Olympic level wrestling, and expose a little bit of that ground game that Talbot has. That, yes, he has shown improvements, it looked like, in the last fight. I just think that this fight is hard to pick for me because everything going into it, it makes me think that Talbot should win. He's younger, he's hungrier, he didn't have a bad weight cut, and he's not talking about retirement like Cejudo is. But I don't know, man. I got a feeling that Henry Cejudo stylistically matches up very well with Peyton Talbot. I think he'll be looking to go out on a win in his last fight, and what a better way to do it than to take out a very highly touted prospect like Peyton Talbot. So that said, give me Henry Cejudo by decision, but this one, you couldn't go wrong either way. I think that Cejudo's smart money for the underdog line that he's at, but I definitely understand why people would be picking Peyton Talbot. Give me Henry Cejudo by decision. Next up on the UFC main card, we have a featured bout between former champion Brandon Moreno and a very hyped Japanese fighter Tatsuro Tairo. This is a very good matchup. One of the fights on the card that I've had the most trouble picking. Both these guys are excellent grapplers. Really, the two of the best grapplers that are in the 125-pound division and maybe in the UFC pound for pound as a whole. Brandon Moreno, of course, is the former champion. You'll remember him for that amazing trilogy that he had with Davidson Figueroa. Currently riding a 2-fight winning streak, and his last 2 losses before that were split decisions to current champion Alexander Pantoja, who has a few wins over him, and a split decision loss to Brandon Royval. I believe that Tatsuro Tairo's last loss was also a split decision to Brandon Royval, and then he bounced back in his last fight, although he did get a fairly not an easy opponent, but it was a late replacement. Sung Soo Park, I believe, stepped in to fight him, and he just wasn't ready for that caliber of competition. This fight is closing at something like a pick'em. I believe at the moment Tairo might be a slight favorite at minus 125, but I don't know, man. I think Brandon Moreno has better wrestling, but I think Tatsuro Tairo is a little bit more of a sub-threat everywhere the fight goes. So at the moment, I have Moreno by decision, but this is one of those fights where you couldn't go wrong betting on either one of these guys. I would probably edge decision either way you pick it, but you never know. These guys are both very good grapplers, and an exchange between the two of them somewhere, one of them might catch the other one in a sub, and it wouldn't surprise me in the least bit. This is like I said, this is the fight on the card that I've had the most trouble picking at the moment. Give me Brandon Moreno by decision, but like I said, you couldn't go wrong picking either one of these guys. These are high level 125-pound fighters and very high level grapplers. I think you're about to see a grappler's delight in this fight, or you might see two guys that grappling stalls each other out, and they might have to strike a little bit more on the feet. And if it goes that way, I think Brandon Moreno's a better striker. I think he carries a little bit more power in his hands, so I think that I will take Brandon Moreno by decision. But like I said, this is a pick'em, and the line is definitely reflecting that. So you bet how you want to bet on this one, but give me Brandon Moreno by decision. Next up in the co-main event, we have our first of 2 title fights on the night, as we have defending 125-pound champion Alexander Pantoja versus a fairly newcomer, Joshua Van. Joshua Van, I believe he wasn't even in the UFC 2 years ago. He's on track. If he wins this fight, he'll be the second youngest champion in UFC history, only trailing John Jones. I believe he's riding a 5 or 6 fight winning streak. He has one UFC loss against Charles Johnson, but he's looked pretty dominant in almost every fight he's had since then. He is a very good striker, very good boxing, has very good power for the division, and he could definitely put any one of the division's lights out. That said, Alexander Pantoja is on a legendary run right now. He's 30-5 as a pro, and this guy has looked pretty much outside of a close fight with Steve Erceg and maybe a close fight with Brandon Moreno, pretty much perfect as champion. I believe he's entering maybe his 4th, 5th defense by now. I didn't exactly look at the exact number, but this is a guy that very good grappling, very heavy pressure, and someone that looks to smother you, dominate you at every position, and eventually lock up that sub. Joshua Van, he could shock the world. He has good power, good boxing, good striking. I just don't think he's quite ready for someone to level in Pantoja. I'm not saying he's been rushed to the title, because he has some very good wins. He is coming off a win over the guy who probably would have been fighting for the belt if he had not beat him, and Brandon Royval. And respect to Royval, because I'm pretty sure he took that fight with Van on short notice without really having to do that. So that said, I have Alexander Pantoja at the moment by second round submission. It may be a little later than that. Van might stick around for a little bit longer, land some good shots. But I think prevailing wisdom says that eventually Alexander Pantoja gets this fight to the ground, and I think that Joshua Van's just a little bit too green. He hasn't been in there with someone to level of Pantoja. Royval is a good grappler, but he doesn't have as good as wrestling as Pantoja, and he definitely doesn't have as good as top pressure as Pantoja. So give me Alexander Pantoja by second round to retain his 125-pound championship in this weekend's co-main event. Last but not least, in this weekend's UFC main event, we have a 135-pound title fight between reigning defending champion Merab Dvalishvili and former champion Petr Yan. This is a rematch between the two. I'm not going to say that I'm not going to take any stock into what happened in the first fight, but I believe that Petr entered that fight with something like a dislocated elbow, maybe a torn shoulder, something like that in his good arm, so he wasn't able to throw his best punches in the fight against Merab, and that's just not going to work at this level, especially against someone as good as Merab. Merab is one of the best wrestlers that the UFC's ever seen. His cardio is insane. The dude can shoot 30, 40 takedowns a fight, and he looks as good in the fifth round as he did in the first. That said, Petr Yan is a very good grappler, very underrated. He's very solid everywhere the fight goes. He's currently riding a 3-fight winning streak, and Petr Yan thinks that because of the way he entered the last fight, that this is going to be a completely different matchup. And I agree. I'm not saying that the results will be different, but I think we get a lot more competitive fight this time around. Merab is on a long winning streak. He has beat probably the top 3 guys in the division since claiming the belt. He's beat Sean O'Malley twice. He beat Corey Sandhagen, and he snatched Umar Nurmagomedov's O. So this is a guy who is looking pretty unbeatable at this point. He might hold that title for as long as he wants to hold it. The lines, it's what you think it would be. Merab's closing at something like a minus 440 favorite, I believe. Petr closing at something like a plus 340 underdog. I think that it's not a bad bet to bet on Petr Yan. I think if something happened, he might catch Merab, knock him out possibly, flash knockout, or we're going to see more of the usual in a Merab fight. We're going to see Merab shoot a lot of takedowns, get a lot of top control time, and just wear Petr down to the point that he's going to not be able to do much the later this fight goes. So I think Petr Yan has to stuff takedowns early. He has to establish some type of rhythm on his feet, and he can't let Merab just get takedown after takedown, and get on top of him and just control where the fight goes, because that's pretty much the Merab style of fight. If he gets a hold of you, even if you get back up, this is a guy, like I said, who could shoot 50 takedowns, and he's going to be just as fresh as he is in the first round entering the fifth round. Doesn't matter how much he grapples, doesn't matter how much control time he has, it doesn't matter how many failed takedowns he has. Merab's cardio is insane, and I think the line makes sense. At the moment, I have Dvalishvili by decision. I think he retains his title this weekend, and I thought that maybe Corey Sandhagen was the worst stylistic matchup for him possibly, but he melted Sandhagen, and it wasn't close. It wasn't very close at all. A lot of people think Petr has a good chance, more than the line might suggest, especially considering that he was injured going into their first matchup, and he might throw some things at Merab that Merab's not expecting. Merab has beat him once, so it's possibly he might underestimate Petr Yan, but Prevailing wisdom says that we see another dominant performance by Merab Dvalishvili. Give me Merab by decision, but you wouldn't be wrong sprinkling a little bit of money how much of an underdog that Petr Yan is at this point. Enjoy those fights, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to throw a little parlay at the end of it. And don't forget that if you want to watch this fight, and I'm just going to cut that.
3, 2, 1, fight!